Hello and welcome again. Let's amplify some of the thought patterns we each need to change if we truly want to create a freer and ultimately a completely free society. Many times the issue of natural law has arisen during these talks. That's because it's the crux of the entire question of freedom. In the physical realm, virtually everyone agrees that the more thorough our knowledge of natural laws, the greater the degree of freedom we are able to exercise as we interact with our environment. Understanding of these and many other physical laws has led to progress in innumerable areas, and the world is scarcely recognizable when compared with what existed just 80 to 100 years ago. Very few people argue with the concept of increasing our knowledge when it comes to the natural laws that govern the world we live in. Yet, when it comes to discerning and getting our thinking and actions in line with natural law as it applies to the nature of human beings, very few are interested in seriously considering such questions. We've seen with our own eyes the difference that learning and applying natural laws to our physical existences produces changes that are almost unimaginable in advance. It's easy to comprehend the idea that had these discoveries not been made and acted upon, that mankind would still be living in basically Stone Age conditions. But is that not roughly what applies to our knowledge and understanding of natural law concerning human nature? Are we not, virtually everywhere we look, confronted by societies which, as far as human interactions between individuals and between individuals and the collective groups they tend to form, are still in the equivalent of Stone Age interactions? Despite the application of veneers of civility, which includes such things as being clothed in textiles rather than animal skins and having more expressive languages, are our societies not still operating under the basic premise of a smallish number issuing commands to the larger masses and enforcing those demands with the threat or literal application of violence? Where is the improvement comparable to that achieved in the realm of physical laws of nature? There has to be a reason for this enormous disparity of progress within these two areas of natural law. And it is obviously stemming from the fact that most people are simply not prepared to do the work of discovering the laws of human nature, or at least applying what knowledge has already been acquired to bring about the changes necessary to elevate us away from the level of brute intimidation and violence that has always characterized human societies, no matter at what level of physical opulence they may operate. For example, it's a natural law or an objective truth that every living entity, be it animal or plant, comes into existence with the inherent right to prolong or preserve its own existence, and if it belongs to a high enough order of life, to improve its conditions if it's able. Some people call that right of existence a God-given right. But God is irrelevant to the question. Whether or not there is a God, those rights exist in nature. For humans, sustaining and improving one's life and conditions involves conscious thought, which introduces morality into the equation. Since everyone comes into the world with the same rights, and sustaining one's life is a right or correct action, being in accordance with natural law, it follows that it's incumbent on everyone to allow all others the same freedom. So we are free to sustain and improve our lives as long as by so doing we don't harm or prevent anyone else from doing the same. That is natural law. And for some religious people, though by no means all, it accords with the imagined wills of the gods they worship. The problems occur when many humans accept the concept of some people possessing authority to compel or coerce others to their will or their beliefs, or even their political policies. In reality, no such authority can objectively exist, since all are born with equal rights. So, whether the coercion that is practiced in the world is motivated by greed, political ambition, or by manipulation by guilt, deception, or fear, originating from religious belief or any other motivation, that is not a right action and is wrong or immoral. When thought about deeply enough, it is not even a right to voluntarily surrender one's freedom to the immoral authority of others, placing oneself in a position of subservience or slavery to their whims or dictates. Why not? Because it is voluntarily abandoning the innate responsibility for maintaining control over one's life and actively encourages the development of wrong or evil behavior in one's fellows. The types of wrongs done by those thus encouraged will inflict real, tangible harm on their victims, which is why it can never be a right to voluntarily surrender one's power and freedom to others who might use the power thus unlawfully bestowed to harm one's fellow humans. It is this abandonment of responsibility and the craven submission to unjustified authority which is the source of virtually all the evil and immorality we see in the world today. It permits the abuse of inalienable rights, creates and perpetuates class distinctions which are enforced by violence, and encourages criminality amongst those who might otherwise be content to be law-abiding were they not subjected to legalized bullying and extortion. Great teachers of the world tend to have various themes in common. They often teach that the knowledge of truth is what sets one free, and that this has little or nothing to do with conditions obtaining in the world, but comes from freeing oneself from wrong or immoral desires or motives. Many of them are anarchist in the true sense of the word, which doesn't mean chaotic lawlessness, but instead that no person should exercise unrighteous dominion over another, no matter from what motivation that might spring. Sadly, almost everyone subscribes to the view that someone should be in charge, and when given the chance, even casts votes in elections, hoping that how they think people ought to behave will somehow be imposed on those with differing opinions or political views. That is obviously a very serious infraction of natural laws and institutionalizes conflict within any community. There is a proper method for ensuring that people comply with natural law and are held to account when they harm others, but it is not the holding of elections and enforcing the will of the majority unto the minority, which is just as immoral as one individual enforcing their will on a single other individual. Such wholesale immorality in a community removes the protection provided by adherence to natural law and sets the stage for all manner of widespread abuses of that law and the destruction of natural justice from the polity of the society. This is what we see on a global scale. Just as an individual's life reflects the choices they have made over time, and their overall level of contentment or happiness indicates the level of their moral values, the same is true for society as a whole. There is no escape from the consequences of our decisions made with respect to natural law. Natural law is immutable. The method for ensuring adherence to natural law is trial by jury, whereby the people retain control of the law and can refuse to convict someone charged with a victimless crime, thereby rendering unjust legislation inoperative without resorting to violence. I refer the viewer to video number 18, Rearward Vision, Forward Motion, in this series for a more detailed explanation of the basics of the trial by jury process. What is needed now is an educational program or drive to flesh out the principles and advantages of trial by jury in the minds of the general public. Of course, the absolute main advantage and the very reason for the need for trial by jury is the capacity to negate, without strife or violence, the effects of unwise or unlawful legislation. Arguments about what degree of sovereignty, if any, should be accorded to parliaments, or those stridently asserting the sovereignty of such bodies are immediately relegated to their proper place in the spectrum of public debate, as are the egos of those prancing about in their elegant puffery of haute couture. The installation of a lawful trial by jury system would very quickly sideline these self-aggrandizing popinjays to their correct place in society, which should properly be out of sight, out of mind. The people are lawfully appointed as the ultimate arbiters of law, and artificially imposed structures such as parliaments and courts, which have arrogated to themselves the legal privileges of both enacting and enforcing legislation, need to be subjected to a very serious downgrading in social status. So, with all these advantages, which are explained eloquently in the video by William Keyte, which is linked in the comments, why do we not have a vibrant, compelling movement, clamouring ever more loudly for the restoration of this vital mechanism to our polity? The main objection encountered seems to consist of a profound lack of trust in the capacity of one's fellow Crown subjects to sensibly conduct serious deliberations were they to be selected for jury service. I dread to think of what Joe Soap would be like on a jury. He's such an idiot, is typical of this type of response. The irony, of course, is that while the Speaker is lamenting the lack of acuity in Joe Soap's thinking, their own biases and prejudices about Joe are given a free pass in this assessment process. I have sat on juries, not in a legal court, but associative ones, where decisions would not affect a defendant's physical or financial status, but could affect their standing within the relevant community involved. Everyone was present of their own free will and accepting of the rules governing such procedures. Being placed in such a position is a very sobering process. I was constantly aware that it was always a possibility that I might be called one day to answer questions or account for my behaviour to my peers, and felt the responsibility to avoid any prejudices I might have had against the defendants, which, since I knew them, did definitely exist. I was aware that it would be worse to incorrectly convict than to erroneously acquit, because lacking absolute certainty of every fact of the matter, an element of doubt existed in these cases. Overall, the process caused me to reflect very deeply on my level of responsibility, and I found myself imagining what it must have been like to be placed in the position of having to justify oneself in such circumstances. I can say that during the event, those present felt a sense of brotherhood or community, even towards the accused, and were seeking the best ways to arrive at an outcome that would help improve that one's condition going forward, while also protecting the rights of the alleged victims. It's not an easy task, but it is very rewarding in terms of gaining an understanding of how civic responsibilities connect everyone in a positive way. If people want to live in a society where all are equal before the law, there really is no evading of these civic responsibilities. Divesting ourselves of responsibility and leaving such tasks to those who may be motivated by other, possibly more venal drives, cannot be recommended as sensible policy. So to any who would desire to live in a free, mutually beneficial society where people deal with each other justly, the message is, become one of those people you would prefer were judging you, in case it ever comes to that. Shown here is a document which we can introduce into conversations, especially with people who express dissatisfaction with our current political and legal systems. We can also spread it onto as many social platforms as possible to get the concept of trial by jury into the public discussion. We can also carry out some of these suggestions ourselves, because once a lawful trial by jury system is installed, the abuses of power perpetrated daily by our corrupt governments can be curtailed more quickly and with less violence or social discord than any other method yet devised. One final question. Who is more worthy of trust? Your neighbours who share your daily concerns, or those prancing popinjays who view you as chattels to be used however they feel so disposed? Let's do this. Thank you for watching.